The reason this song is so poignant, and the reason, no matter what our age or generation, it speaks to us, is because it is the embodiment of emotional abandonment, physical and emotional abandonment. Now today, I want to go into the world of this in a healing way. And it's a good example, as I said before, when I came into the service, what is it that we are as a spiritual community as opposed to a religious community, is that one of the ways to explore life and meaning and healing that runs through all religious traditions and has itself planted firmly in spiritual traditions is the idea of archetype. And to me, archetype in my journey as a spiritual seeker, as someone who would say that this teaching that is presented at this center saved my life many years ago. I mean, I'm a true believer in metaphysics and new thought because it saved my life. I would not be who I am today without this teaching. It was my way to recover who I really was. And archetype is one of the greatest tools that I had to work with. And I know that we have pieces that resonate with each of us, but I think to move into this, we think of the idea of archetype. So we have in this song the masculine authority figure, the father. So in religion, we think of mother, father. We have the masculine father, and we have the masculine son. Okay. And we look at that relationship. And we imagine the son, so think of this archetypal story that's in all religion, the son looking at the father, the prince looking at the king. How shall I be in the world? Show me how to be. I'm here. Nobody gave me a book. What am I going to do? Now, the beauty of this song is that it comes from the archetype father, singing about the relationship of his son from the place of an incredible wisdom, which is both beautiful because it has a tragic streak in it of looking back. I'm so proud of the fact that my son wants to be like me, and one day he is. But I'm finding that to be challenging. When I grew up in fundamentalist Christianity in a Baptist church, and there was a tradition in those churches of these huge youth groups. And so I was involved in a youth group, and that's something the Baptists do really well. I mean, they get anyway, I won't say. They get the kids in and they raise the kids up, and you come up through. And so I was 13, about 13. I've been thinking about this story all week. It's a story I've carried with me my whole life, well, since I was 13, thinking about what age I was. And the reason I know it must have been about 13 is because in the tradition of the church I grew up in, you were involved in Sunday school and you were involved in youth stuff when you were a kid, and then you went into junior high, and so you kind of became a young teen, and then there were the kids in high school that were the teens. And so the church kind of broke those three up, but every once in a while they would allow the young teens to be with the teenagers. And it's like, oh my God, it's so amazing to be with those people, and so I think they also found out that if you put a bunch of junior high kids with a bunch of high school kids, the junior high kids will mellow out a little bit because the high school kids are so cool, and you just can't be a raving maniac you are like in junior high, when the hormones, hey, hormones, yeah, let's go, let me go crazy, And so we had to be cool around the older people. So there was a big youth activity. It was on a weekend, probably a Saturday. And so everybody got together to play volleyball, and then we were going to have this huge lunch together, and then afterwards we were going to go into some place, and then they were going to hit us with the with the sermon of some kind, And so in between some of those, there was a young woman who was probably a junior in high school, and she was part of the teen group, and she had invited her boyfriend, who didn't go to church at all, to this, and he said, "Hey, come with me to this," and he did. And he had a broken forearm, and back in those days, this is probably about 1970, around that time. It was a plaster cast, which you don't see anymore. And it was the old plaster cast, those white casts that got really ugly and dirty looking as you wore them, And so back in those days, we used to, if you had a plaster cast, you had all your friends sign it, and you had pens and felt pens and stuff, and people would draw on them and stuff. And so this young man, he had very long hair. He was a junior in high school, and he had his cast, and on his cast, either he or somebody had drawn this very intricate and beautiful kind of peace symbol. And if you remember the peace symbols, okay, still with us, which is wonderful. And so, so the people who were running this day was like the youth pastor and the youth pastor's, teaching team and stuff like that. Well, the pastor of the church itself, the head dude, this older gentleman, he decides to spend the day with us because he wants us to be in his influence as well. And he's kind of hanging out. He wants to be cool and stuff. So anyway, we're all milling around, and the pastor, the senior pastor, the church, religious director was there, and he sees this gentleman with the cast with the peace symbol on it. And now this is a time, as you all know, where Vietnam was going on, and there was a lot going on. Things were going on college campuses, and we had all kinds of movements going on, and there was sometimes there was violence, and every minority group in America was starting to find their voice, and some things were coming forward. And so, but the main thing was the backdrop of Vietnam. And so and I remember this really well. It had a big impression on me. The pastor walks over to this guy and says, he looks at his cast, he says, "I see you got the footprint of the American chicken on your cast." Whoa. And this kid looked at him and he said something to the effect of, "Well, no, sir, it's a peace sign." And like I said, son, American chicken. Okay? And I stood there, even though I had been completely raised in this religion, and I was only 13, about the age where we start thinking for ourselves a little bit. I was like, because the pastor is one of those guys, just like, show me how to be in the world, pastor, And I was like, whoa. I looked at the guy's face. I'll never forget it. And his girlfriend, I knew her, her family was in the church. She's looking at her boyfriend like, oh, God. And I'm going, wow. And it touched me in my heart. And I wasn't used to that. If it wasn't about peanut butter sandwiches or something, I wasn't used to being touched in the heart, It's like I just knew, like, whoa. Now let's think about that from the archetypal standpoint. And I want to introduce another archetypal piece in this, which is called the Christ ideal, the Christ consciousness, the Christ manifestation. So let's think about this for a moment. The Christ coming forth, the highest ideal, the most profound. That's what we talk about all the time. That's what the prayer was about this morning, looking through the veil at the Christ manifestation, the highest ideal. Oh, you don't understand. I have this challenge. I have this disease. There's a Christ ideal that is the truth coming forward, being birthed. Vietnam's going on. All the college campuses are going on. The Black Panthers are going on. Women's movement's going on. All, political conventions falling apart. It's got a peace symbol. It's a Christ ideal. It was the Christ consciousness. Yeah, sir, we're thinking peace might be possible. And here was a man. I'm trying really hard not to be judgmental on this. You got to feel me on this, Here's a man who occupies the ideal of the masculine archetype. Now, he just happens to be a man. I'm thinking more about the archetype. The masculine archetype who says, peace? I'm sorry. I don't value that. In fact, I find it so threatening that I'm going to make you and your long hair feel kind of bad about yourself. Wow. How then shall I live, sir? How then shall I be in this world? One of my favorite people in our movement who occupies a couple of generations ahead of us in terms of the work of archetype is Charles Fillmore, co-founder of Unity. Ernest Holmes was the founder of our movement, who I have nothing but respect for, who's been a great teacher for me. But Fillmore, in terms of the archetype, is someone who I love the work that he did on it. So this is what Charles Fillmore would say. So, okay, let's think about the sacred masculine. Because what Cat Stevens sang about, a song written by Harry Chapin, was something that a lot of young males can relate to. The recording you heard, I think, is from like 1974 or something. And yet today, it's just as fresh as ever. Today, in fact, there's a real grungy kind of band who has a new version of it that's really kind of rough and tumble. I almost played that, but it's a little off the hook, right? I just found it recently. It was only released like 2 years ago. It's amazing, the video of that. So why does this theme stand up from the standpoint of the archetype? And Charles Fillmore comes forward, and he contemplates this idea, what is the sacred masculine? And what he shares with us is the archetype of the sacred masculine. He says it's a unique, faith-based presence of dedicated commitment. The sacred masculine is a dedicated commitment. And what he goes to is the traditional Christmas story that we get in the Bible, Joseph and Mary and the Christ and the manger and the cows and the wise men and all that stuff going on. All right? That's where Fillmore goes. And he said, Joseph is committed entirely to the nurturing of the feminine process of birthing, the Christ ideal, even when he doesn't understand it. So you read that biblical narrative, and what you'll find out is Joseph, Mary comes along, and I guess they're going to be engaged. And oh, by the way, Joseph, I'm with child. Now I want you to think about this for a moment, in the context of the historical time and being a Jewish man and woman. I mean, that ain't cool. Let's not go into it any further. But to have your fiance come up pregnant, and then you say, how did this happen? Well, like I had this whole Holy Spirit thing go on and stuff. I mean, can you imagine Joseph telling his friends about that? What they're saying? Joseph doesn't understand it. What? Joseph, this is a Christ ideal. This is a high ideal that I'm carrying forth. You have to trust me on that. It's like peace in the 70s. Got some peace going on. You got to trust me on this. So Charles Fillmore says, Joseph goes, okay. And let's think for a moment of some Christmas special thing we've seen where, Joseph and Mary are heading they got to go somewhere, and we got the archetype again, the donkey. Mary's on the donkey, and who's leading with the donkey is Joseph. Okay, I'm down for this. The sacred masculine is that part of creation where it says, okay, you're birthing this idea, and I'm going to create the place and the space where the nurturing is going to go on. The sacred masculine would be the classic nest maker for the two birds. Okay, You're gonna lay the eggs. I'm gonna have to go out and get the worms and the fish, depending upon what kind of bird we are. But I'm gonna build the nest, and you can count on me. I'm here. I'm here for you. Mary, I'm here for you. Hey, kid, what's that on your cast? It's a peace symbol. Okay, kid, I'm here for you. Let's talk about peace. Let's create the place and space of peace. That's what that's what the sacred masculine's about. Some years ago, I discovered a book, and I have given so many of these books away over the years. And anyone who either you're a male or you know a male that is like in trouble, you need to get the book. It's called Meditations on the Masculine Soul, A Quiet Presence. Okay, and it's put together by 3 gentlemen. One of my favorite books that I lost in the fire and I haven't replaced, and I have no idea why. In that, it's a daily thing. In other words, that's what I love about it. It's this daily inspiration, each page of the day. And there was a piece in there that became so meaningful to me, and it's called the Marlboro Man archetype. Okay? And so the gentleman who put this book together on what it is to embody the sacred masculine, their question is, what happened? I mean, the sacred masculine is really struggling. And so these guys came up with this idea of, well, it's the Marlboro Man archetype. And the Marlboro Man, they believe, was really generated in the Industrial Revolution when men began to move out of the home into the world of either working in factories or fighting wars or whatever they were, and the home was completely turned over to the feminine. And so basically there was one line in the passage, they said, most of us grew up more familiar with the backs of our fathers than the fronts of our fathers, because they were all heading out the door. And the archetype of the Marlboro Man is perpetually leaving the nest in order to go out and labor or fight a war in support of that nest that they know that he no longer was present for. Its attributes are aloofness, emotional abandonment, a dedication to authorities beyond the nest, and this is what's important to what we just saw, entrapment in loneliness. Did you hear the father in Cat Stevens' voice? Where does he end up at the end? He's lonely. He's disconnected. So what we have to look at in terms of the metaphysics of it, the meaning of it, and the archetypes of it, is that what goes on between the sacred masculine and the sacred feminine is a sacred dance. It's about bringing forth and nurturing the Christ creating together. It's about the feminine idea, which, we can say men and women, but basically this lives in all of us. And so today I'm trying to walk this line because this exists in all of us, but also as I look at the world and as a male, and the males I've been working with for 30 years in different capacities, in the correctional world, in the addiction world. I've been facing the archetype of the Marlboro Man for 30 years, not just in myself, but in others. But remembering that this exists in all of us as well, is the feminine brings forward what is being birthed, and the masculine creates the place and the space for that to happen. Charles Fillmore says, Mary committed entirely to the nurturance of the birthing process of the coming forth of the Christ ideal. Joseph committed entirely to nurturing the place and space of that birthing, even if initially he does not understand it. He's talking about this whole thing being an exercise in faith, in commitment. the sacred feminine and the sacred masculine are basically, they are faith ideals. And I know right now, in closing, I know right now that as we look at this world and we see what's going on in terms of whatever challenges we see, it's a beautiful world, it's amazing, but whatever challenges may be, there may be ideals coming forward today that we may not completely understand. But if they are the Christ ideals, our job is to show up and nurture those in the best of our ability. That's what this is about. So that we can move beyond the entrapment of isolation and disconnection from all the good and all the love and the peace and everything that I know that we can bring to this world if we can dedicate ourselves from a faith consciousness in supporting those ideals.